Hello everyone, this is YIC and SADD Club doing a collaboration for a podcast discussion towards the topic of depression and mental health during COVID-19. So first, in today's discussion, we have Amelia Chung from SADD Club. And we have me, Christine Lee from YIC. And then we have Mr. Davis as one of our counselors.
Hello.
And Mrs. Davis as well.
Hi.
So, the first question or topic I wanted to ask in this discussion is, what are your thoughts towards mental health and depression during COVID-19? Like, why is it important?
Is it okay if I jump in?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. So just to clarify, you're asking like, why is the topic around mental health important during COVID-19?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think, one thing that we know is that depression has been on the rise since COVID-19 started, and significantly on the rise, and globally, it's not unique to any specific country. And there, I think, are a multitude of reasons for that. One is isolation. We've lack of routine. We've been disconnected from friends and family, and there's like this inability to do things freely, that we're used to doing. And I look at it a lot like the grief process, the process of grieving, someone who passes away. We're also like grieving the loss of a life that we once had. And so I think that's a big part of it. And the more we talk about it and we normalize the conversation, people can start to feel like or recognize I'm not alone in this, and there is support.
Yeah, totally. I feel like even as a student, like being a teenager itself, you have a lot of ups and downs and just like so many mood changes that come along with being a teenager. But I feel like because of the pandemic and COVID-19, it kind of made the up and downs seem more drastic. I mean, throughout my whole entire teenage life, there was COVID-19 so far. So I can't really know what it would have felt like if there wasn't COVID-19. But I feel like if there wasn't COVID influencing my life, wouldn't there have been a more normal state that we could have had as high schoolers and like as teenagers? I feel like that's super important.
And I also feel like a lot of students, since because of quarantine and everything, they can like kind of feel like they're away from like their peers and everything, and that can also like mentally affect them because they're not like used to like just being alone all the time. And I feel like if some people already have some sort of like depressed like feeling, or if they're in a depressed state, like not having their peers around or like other people around also can affect them during like COVID. So yeah.
Yeah, I think your grade specifically, right? I mean, I think in the 9th grade is when it hit, in late February, early March, and then all of your 10th grade was affected. We went virtual and back, and then 11th grade, I think at some point we probably thought it was going to normalize, and then the fact that we've been virtual again, I think it's been a little bit of a shock to the system. We know like that. We need that purpose in our life, and we also need that connection with others. And COVID has definitely impacted our ability to access both of those.
Mm-hmm. Is a lot of the stuff that, do you find yourself like in this position where you were anticipating a lot of exciting things about high school that now it's upsetting that it hasn't happened?
Like, I feel like a lot of students, they probably experience like disappointment amongst like even for sports. Like I feel like a lot of things like such as like a lot of little things can affect students like mentally. Like some people really like look forward to like school like activities and everything, like such as like basketball or whatever, and like a lot of the sports, they're all like canceled or everything because of COVID. And I think like that can also bring like extra like sad states for students, because it's like something that they've been like waiting for, wanting to do, but cannot because of COVID, and all they can do is just like stay inside. It's like nothing like they can control.
Yeah, for sure. That was such a big factor. I remember during freshman year, like even me and Amelia, we would talk about like, oh, there's like snowball coming up. We should buy dresses, and we're like, oh, deciding. Like everyone bought their own dress. Like the theme was black and white.
So excited.
Yeah, but it didn't happen, so that was kind of sad. And I think those small things that we would look forward to as teenagers and as just high schoolers in general, they started disappearing, and I guess that just became a normal now. Like, we don't expect snowball, we don't expect like prom, we don't expect like super big fun activities that we had in school like before, because we know that there's the pandemic and we have to be more careful. So I feel like those small exciting things that should have happened throughout the school year just kind of slowly decreased, and I think that kind of also affected our mindset towards school. It felt more like school is a place where we have to study, where we have to take tests, where we have to like train for sports. It felt less exciting, I think.
That's why like students had additional like stress when it came to like COVID, and also like exams and just like everything else. Like, it's hard studying online because it's different than going to school. And although like a lot of students may enjoy online because they might get more like sleep or whatever, it's also like it affects your own education when it comes to like AP exams. Oh, we need to prepare, but what can we do? Because we're all like just staying home and we can't get like more help from teachers when we actually need it because we're online. It's kind of different.
Yeah. Do you talk about it amongst your friends? Do y'all talk about those like bigger feelings of anxiety and depression that come up around COVID?
I think a few, like sometimes that may happen, but most of the time, a lot of people, they don't talk about like their mental state or how they feel, mostly because like they don't want to feel judged or something like that, but also because like they're trying to just like push through all this like stress and everything. And talking about it is good, but a lot of students, they prefer rather to just not talk about it, I think.
Yeah, and there's this thing where, in a way, saying like, oh, it was really hard to study because this week we went online, but everyone went online. So in a way, it's like, am I making excuses for myself for COVID? Is COVID my excuse for not having a great performance in my academics? Is an excuse for me to not go out and meet friends? Like, I feel like there's also this underlying factor where we kind of guilt trip ourselves into feeling that maybe we're making excuses for our own actions when actually in real life it is an excuse, because like it's something that we shouldn't have ever like had to experience, or it's something that everyone like faces in different ways. Like, it's not all the same to everyone. So I feel like that's that too.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. It's a valid reason. It's not an excuse. It's a valid reason that's impacting your education and your social life. And Christine, you touched on it a little bit, and I think it's definitely had an impact on students where school has become like, and especially when we were on the AB schedule, it's like every time you came to school, almost you probably felt like you were taking summatives.
Yeah.
And so then it becomes even more of a place of stress. And then also, we're not interacting socially, and sometimes you all might go like 6 days without being in school, depending on the schedule. So then there's also that pressure of interacting socially with people who you haven't seen or you're not really comfortable with. So yeah, I think it definitely changed the atmosphere of school. And again, like, your grade specifically has not experienced what at one point we considered a normal high school experience.
Yeah. I have a question for the counselors. So we mostly talked about how the students' lives were affected, and for what I know is Mr. Davis and Mrs. Davis, like, you guys, it hasn't been long since you came to Korea, and then like obviously your lives have probably been affected through the pandemic. So what are some personal experiences that you experienced as like an adult going through the pandemic?
Well, I'm so glad you asked that, because I was going to say, you had mentioned like what I call it COVID fatigue, but just that feeling of, am I making an excuse out of this? And then like, I noticed even whenever we were laughing at Mr. Davis and I were laughing about this the other night, because we went out with a group of friends and we felt tired from that because, we haven't been doing it very much. And there's that constant second guessing of, should we be doing this? Is this safe? Is this, and we're not used to having to question and think that much about every choice that we make. And so you had mentioned how students were feeling, and I would say that is probably across all lines of age and who you are around that COVID fatigue and just feeling like, what's the word? I love this word that came out that has started being used more in the last couple of years, languishing. Have you heard this word?
No.
Like languishing it's just kind of like losing a sense of purpose. Like you're just kind of here. Like you're maybe not fully depressed, but you're not experiencing life like with full like joy and happiness. You're just kind of like blah, like a little like meh. My day is just okay, and I think that has been something that I know as an adult that I've experienced more so in the last 2 years than any other time.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't known Korea outside of COVID. I don't know. In some ways, I think because we haven't traveled, I think probably if we had been here during a time when there wasn't COVID, maybe we would be going to like Thailand and Vietnam and Japan and the Philippines, all these places in Southeast Asia. And instead what we've done is travel around the peninsula a lot. And so in some ways that's been a really positive experience, but I think there's always that part of wonder. I definitely feel like a parent because I say like, well, we'll see a lot, and I remember as a kid like hating when my parents said that because I'm like, oh, that means no. But I feel like that's COVID because anytime you make a plan, no matter what it is, I mean, I feel like that even with a soccer game or even if like we're planning on like trying to plan this meeting, right? And do we do it in person or do we do it, through video? It's like, well, we'll see because you just don't know what's going to happen. And so it's really hard when we don't know what the routine is. We don't know what to expect. And I think that also affects our ability to have hope. Mm-hmm. It's like you get hopeful for something, whether it's like your snowball dance or a basketball game or a soccer game, and you don't let yourself fully invest in that hope, and become like fully 100% excited because you're worried it's going to get ripped out from under you. And so that's a hard thing to deal with as well, that we don't really, like, again, like Ms. Davis is saying, it's not necessarily depression, right, or isolation or lack of connection, but it's just not being able to fully invest in hope.
Well said.
I feel like, and also in general, towards mental health as well, like one of the bigger factors I feel like is there's so much anxiety towards everything. Like everyone becomes so sensitive about certain things, just like a test or just having the fact to go to school. Like everyone seems more agitated, and there's like a lot of anxiety that goes around because first you don't know if your friend is negative. Like your friend might be positive and you might like have dinner with her or like eat out and then like or like have a sleepover and then you realize, oh, she was positive and now I have COVID. Like there's so much anxiety about just meeting people in general, and also about the fact of going to school. And then I feel like it's like a rise of anxiety and all, like it's like a perfect chance for negative thoughts to just start to like come up.
Yeah, like I agree with Christine because I've seen a lot of people who are very like anxious about COVID, and a lot of people like not being able to like even like hang out with their friends because their parents are really strict about COVID, and that also like I guess like if you want to be like with your friends and everything, you're excited about that, and that just like gets pushed down because your parents aren't allowing you to go out. Then that can actually cause like extra stress as well as a student because we're very young and we want to like hang out and just have fun, but that we're like unable to do that due to COVID and everything, and like all the activities that we want to do are just like restricted, and I think that like kind of like affects everybody and brings their stress level.
Well, then it's got to be hard. You see, I'm sure with the parent piece, like each one of your parents has different rules and different levels of safety around COVID. And so if your parents say, no, you can't go out, and your parents say, no, it's fine, we don't care, that creates these feelings of even being more left out of activities, less like socially connected, if you're having to abide by a different set of rules than your friends.
Yeah. Like that's a really big factor. And personally, I had a lot of anxiety about going out and meeting new people. Like people I knew and trusted, yes, I would go out to meet them, but I didn't really want to meet new people because like a close relative of mine, my grandpa, he has difficulty breathing because he doesn't have like the best health condition towards his lungs. So if he gets COVID, that's an automatic an excuse for me to say goodbye. So my parents and I were also really careful about meeting relatives, and because we're not sure if we're like safe to meet older relatives, and like there's so much possibilities to us like giving out COVID or giving bacteria or like the virus in general. So I feel like even like saying hi to your grandparents, it's kind of like a distanced feeling. And I don't know, like even when I go to my grandparents' house now, like a few days ago it was my birthday and they really wanted to see me on that day, so we wore our masks and then we blew a cake, but we couldn't blow the cake, so we would like clap the candles off. Yeah. That was like, I don't know, in a way it's like memorable, but also a little bit sad because we're not able to completely invest, like Mr. Davis said, into the moment. It's more like this distanced feeling from reality.
Yeah.
I feel like.
Yeah, like adding on to Christine, there are a lot of people who like they don't really live in Korea, and like you guys, they have other family members in other countries, and they were unable to like go there because for like vacation to even visit them or like see them, like even though they miss them because like of COVID and everything. I think like that can also like affect them a lot, because I have like people who like kind of want to see their like dads and moms in other countries because like they went there for work or anything, and they were unable to like spend their like holidays with their families and everything. I think that's just like really upsetting in general, and like just I think that can also like cause students to become like depressed and everything.
Yeah. I feel like this more than us students, I feel like there's a lot of teacher influences, because being in an international school, most of the teachers are from other countries than Korea. So I feel like there's a lot of difficulty, and also because of that, just the fact that you miss your parents, that you miss like your relatives and your friends that are outside of the country. I think that's also a reason why many teachers are a bit lonely here in South Korea. So do you guys have had any experiences where you kind of felt lonely and isolated from like your relatives and friends back at home?
I just want to thank you for your empathy, Kristen. Yeah. I think that's just really thoughtful to be thinking about teachers in that way and the people around you. And I think that's part of it, right, is that we're trying to understand everybody's experiences and not just our own. I definitely thought that we would have a lot of friends and family visiting us in Korea. Ashley's mom came out 2 winter breaks ago, and she had to quarantine in our apartment for 14 days while we moved out and stayed in a different apartment. So there are definitely challenges around that. And I think it just depends on where you're at in your life and where your parents are at in their life or your other family members. I mean, I think, my dad's almost 80. And so the idea of not being able to get home to see him, it's still like a 15-hour flight, right? But as freely as what maybe I would have been able to, I think definitely presents some anxiety, But I think for the most part, I feel lucky. I've got a really, really great friend in Miss Davis, and so being here and being isolated, it's something that I don't see that as a negative, but I think for some people, it just depends on your situation, your family. Yeah, it can definitely feel lonely or just maybe feeling a little bit trapped.
Yeah, it can feel stressful if an family emergency comes up. It's a lot more difficult to jump on a plane. I mean, it's hard to remember that just a few years ago you could go to the airport and get on a plane right then, and now you have to do a bunch of paperwork and COVID tests and different things, so it's a lot riskier. And Christina, I want to go back to something you said earlier and just acknowledge that it is very taxing and like creates a lot of tension within your body when you're constantly like stressed and thinking about COVID. It's just this extra layer that it feels like a heavy like jacket that you're constantly wearing, right? That you just want to be free of it. And it does take a toll. Like it's tiring. And so I think honoring that and not like giving yourself some space. Yeah, everyone could afford to do that. You know, just giving ourselves space and acknowledging that it is taking extra energy, mental energy, emotional energy. And when you're students and you have stressful, you know, course load and you're doing extra things outside of school, and maybe you're just feeling a little more like maxed out or tapped out than what you normally would, remember that you're also dealing with the ups and downs of COVID, and give yourself a little bit of grace around that.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask, what are some ways how we could, I feel like COVID in general is like a perfect situation for us to like bring up those negative thoughts that we had, just like those things towards like not wanting to go out, just wanting to stay alone. And sometimes like in a way it could be a way of giving ourselves the self-love that we need, but at the same time it could be a reason for us that kind of shuts us out from reality and from the outside world. But I wanted to ask, like, what are some ways we could prevent that from being too much or too excessive, and how can we like keep up with the world and keep up still staying on trend with people as well?
I mean, I have trouble with that.
Me too.
You know, I know, especially like right now with the war in Ukraine, you know, it's like a fine balance with how much do I look at my phone and how much news do I read. And you can definitely go down a rabbit hole, you know, and take yourself into like all of a sudden, you know, hours of negative information. So I think that's a really hard thing to balance. I think part of it, you know, you mentioned like that self-love or that self-compassion, you know, and being forgiving and understanding of where you're at and what you're going through. I think reminding yourself that you're doing your best, you know, and you're good enough as you are. Like there doesn't need to be that level of self-improvement or high expectations that maybe we held ourselves to previously. It's not to say to entirely give up, but just to know that all these other emotions and feelings and the times of what they're presenting us right now, it's going to be more tiring and more exhausting, and we can only handle so much. I think also like being really compassionate towards others is huge. You know, one of the things that I've been talking about with people is like we need to stop feeling guilty about being sick. You know, I think there was a time, you know, that and still maybe like if someone gets COVID, like that they feel ashamed, you know, or that something wrong. I think especially in Korea, I can say like everyone's doing their best, you know, to not get COVID. But I think with the new variant, it's happening, right? And so instead of like blaming or shaming people for having COVID, it's like, okay, you're sick and I care about you. Like, are you feeling okay? Right?
Yeah, and I think adding on to some of the things Mr. Davis said around like what can you do, a few different things come to my mind. One is setting boundaries. I think oftentimes when we think about self-care in a new age way of thinking about self-care, I think people think about going to get your nails done or going like taking a nice long shower. But I think one of the best ways that you can practice self-care is having healthy boundaries. And so that might mean like having honest conversations with yourself about, do I want to do 3 summer programs, or could I say no to 1 or 2 and just do 1? Or do I like, can I say, what can you say no to? What can you like really have those honest conversations with yourself, and don't just do things because you feel like you should be doing them. And that's that self-preservation and taking care of yourself. And then the other piece is our brains work in funny ways. I was just talking to someone about this, in that sometimes we know all the right things that we need to be doing to be healthy mentally and emotionally. And a lot of times our brains override it and say, no, just sit in front of the computer or on TikTok for 7 hours. That's way better. But then you do that and you're like, feel just not great, right? And so you sometimes have to override your brain and be like, nope, I'm going to go for a 30-minute walk. I'm going to call a friend instead of stare at my phone for 2 hours. I'm going, and I can promise this is not just a teenage thing. Mr. Davis and I do the same thing. We get home, like yesterday, I was like, I'm so tired. Let's just sit. And Mr. Davis is like, nope, we're going for a walk. And it felt so good, but your brain just wants to sometimes do things that aren't helpful. And remembering, like, getting lots of sleep, drinking lots of water. Amelia, I've seen you drink water like 5 times. That's so good. Hydrate, sleep, 30 minutes outside a day, laughing with your friends. Like, those are the things that really do help our mental health all the time, not just in COVID, but all the time.
Yeah, I feel like interactions with other people is really like important.
Yeah.
Like when it comes to COVID, because we're all isolated, but just like spending your time like with like others through like virtually or in any way, it can actually like help a lot than just being alone and just doing, oh, I want to watch TV all day or something. Like you can actually like just do other things with your friends, like call them or like those are really
like find ways to be silly and have fun, and laughter is like the best stress relief, right? And like there's just certain things that you can do that are helpful. But there are going to be days when your brain and your body are like, no, just sit in front of the TV. But try to like pick one thing that's healthy.
Yeah. Cool. I feel like I'm one of those people who do that a lot. Like, I try to be more interactive with people, but in general, before COVID, I was like super introvert. I didn't really like being around people. I preferred staying home, just being by myself. I was the type of person who enjoyed that. So in the beginning, midst of COVID and in the pandemic, it's basically an excuse for you to stay home and isolate yourself. So in a way, I was kind of like enjoying the first few moments of COVID. But now, there's just days when I feel like, oh, like if there wasn't COVID, then would I be more active? Would I be more interactive with my friends? Would I be more social? Maybe I could have had more friends from other schools, and like a lot of ways how international school students like meet other international school students is through SNS, but also by just going out and meeting friends in general, and you meet another person from a different school. So I feel like those small interactions that could have happened so much more easily without the pandemic really affected us. And in a way, for a person who doesn't really enjoy going out and a person who is already having difficulty with going out and being active socially, I think it makes it so much more easier for me to just crawl into a hole and never come out. Like, those small things just really make it difficult.
Yeah, it's comfortable, and I encourage you to find, you don't need 10 friends, you don't need to go out every night, right? But finding that one person that you're comfortable with, and it could even be a family member, but whoever it is, you find that person or those 2 people that you're comfortable with and check in with them each week, just, it doesn't have to be big, but you're just keeping those connections alive.
Yeah.
I feel like Amelia does that very well, and I want some input from her. I mean, she texts every day in the morning, "Good morning" to me, so I'm like, hey.
It's genuinely happy too. You can always count on that with Amelia in the mornings.
Small happy virus in the morning, I guess.
That's really sweet.
Yeah.
I feel like it's like, because you don't want like other people to feel like they're alone or anything, like, and I'm a very like outgoing person in general, like very different from Christine. And I'm rather like, I know how some people can feel like lonely when they're like alone, and I feel like because we're still friends, like I want to reach out to them and just like because small things like actually like affect a lot on other people, and just by like even talking to like people can like brighten up their day. So like I try to like just like kind of like bring positive vibes to people.
That's great. That is your strength, and that's so good. And like, go with that. And Christine, there's nothing wrong with you because you're an introvert. Like, honor that part of who you are, you know. And it's, but also like accept the love from the extroverts in your life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Amelia, do you ever feel pressured by that?
I think like when I was like a bit like during like the earlier time for COVID, I felt kind of like because I was an outgoing person and I kind of felt pressured to kind of like brighten everybody up and things like that. Because it's like it's also like pressure on you because you don't want other people to just be down all the time. You want to like kind of like motivate them, but it's also like hard on yourself because you don't honestly always like feel happy and things like that. But I think you also want to make other people happy. But I think like trying to put that effort in kind of like changed it, like making me kind of like also a more positive person than before, and like want just like making other people like brightening their day makes me like happy too. So I think that's.
I think some of it it's like so that's like intentional, right? I mean, in some ways you're setting an intention for how you're approaching the day, but then you're also like at the same time being forgiving of yourself. I think about this conversation that we're having, like I'm energized by it, you know, and I think part of it is because there's like an intention behind it, you know, and I think we're sharing our thoughts and our ideas, so it's in addition to like finding ways to connect, like making sure that those are times that are, you know, that are intentional, right? Like you're saying like, okay, I'm not gonna, you know, like when Miss Davis and I go outside, like in nature, like we have a rule that we're not on our phones, you know, so like we're really kind of setting that intention to be able to connect, you know, so I think like when you go for a walk, maybe you don't listen to music like for 30 minutes or you leave your phone at home or whatever it might be, or when you go and have lunch with a friend, you kind of put your phones away so that you're really like zoned in on the conversation that moment.
Yeah, I think that's really good.
Yeah, it's funny how it can feel a little uncomfortable to like not have your phone as soon as you get bored or as soon as like you're standing there alone. It's so impulsive just to, or reactive to pull your phone out and standing there and just being like, I'm going to look around and see what, you know, other people are doing or seeing, like looking at the birds and just kind of pausing for a minute before you pull out your phone.
But if you're on the subway, you're the only one not on your phone.
I know. I love watching people.
100%.
Yeah.
I was going to look at you. They don't have a phone.
I feel like that's also really big for people who take a lot of public transportations. If you look at them on the bus or on the subway, everyone's doing their phone, and I mean, you feel like an outlier if you're not doing your phone and you're sitting there and just watching the windows. And I feel like people are like looking at you as if you're weird. So just pressure to be pretending to do something on my phone when actually I don't really have anything I want to do on my phone. Maybe I would just want to like see the view, but I can't do it. I
had this time where I felt it was like very awkward because the subway was full and everyone's like on their phone, and I can't even like look anywhere else because then I'll be like I'll match eyes with someone.
Yeah.
So I just like get my phone and like type random like letters on my note and just like type it. And it's like texting somebody and. Yeah, I did that before. I think it's also like pressure because like other people are just like, and I know that because we're young, like social media is really important to us, and like everyone's on their phone. But I think it's also good to like not like be on your phone all the time and just focus on like other things because social media can also stress you out.
Yeah, it's good to recognize that. I do have to say though, well, one of my favorite things on the subway is looking at what other people are looking at on their phone. I know that sounds kind of creepy, but I'm always like looking at the guy next to me, like, what is he watching? And sometimes I love whenever older people are just cracking up at YouTube videos on the subway. I don't know. I think it's the funniest thing. But taking breaks, like recognizing, okay, when I spend 4 hours on social media, I feel just kind of yucky, you know, and so putting it down.
I feel like social media can also like kind of in a way trap us from like experiencing the outside world, but also because of social media, I think COVID, like the pandemic, wasn't as bad. Like I feel like if the pandemic happened like 50 years ago, then it would have been a bit more harder because first, if you want to call someone, you're gonna have to like put in more effort, and it's harder for them to have like a phone because you don't have like a separate like. I'm not sure like what it was like 50 years ago, but I'm pretty sure.
Even 20 years ago, Christina was.
Oh, really? Okay.
Don't look at me, Christine.
Yeah, I feel like it would have been so hard. Like doing a conference like this, like it would take 2 months to schedule. I feel like.
I do think that's like your generation. If there was a generation that was built and made to withstand a pandemic,
yeah,
it was you all, right? Because you have been able to connect virtually, and maybe it's a hard thing to balance. I mean, I think I had a much different opinion about video games, and I played video games when I was a kid, but there was no like literally your friends were and you were in the same room and you were playing video games, right? Mm. But like you connect with people, right? That you're playing video games with. Like you're having conversations on your headset or whatever it might be. So there is that form of connection that you still get to have, and maybe it's not as personal or as genuine as if we weren't in a pandemic, but it's still something. So I think you're exactly right, Christine. I think social media has probably, especially for you all when you're at your like peak of needing that connection with your peers, I think it's really helped.
I feel like how you use the social media is really important. So yes, you could use it in a negative way and a negative influence into your life, but I also believe that a certain amount of social media is a way to keep you up with reality in a way, because the pandemic makes it so much more easier to just like be out in your own little rabbit hole and just out of the world. But in a way, social media is the one thing that can like kind of keep us up to date. For instance, like how you mentioned about the Ukrainian war and Russia and the whole situation. Like in a way, it's a very sensitive topic, and if you're not there, you can't really experience what it's like. But there are people who are doing live videos throughout the war, and there's also people who are like talking about it through social media, writing like tweets, comments, and on Instagram. Like those small things just help us realize, oh, there are other people in the world who are going through a certain crisis while we're here. In a way, it's a luxury, so it's an easier way to like connect with people from like afar. I feel like that's really important.
It's made the world a lot smaller, and it's enabled us to have a lot more empathy, hopefully. Yeah. And I love what balance is the thing that I'm hearing, finding balance in all areas of your life. It doesn't mean cutting out social media, but finding some balance with it. It doesn't mean introverting fully, but finding some balance. And it doesn't mean, always being there to cheer people up, taking care of yourself as well, but finding balance with it. Yeah. Girls, I hate to do this, but I have a meeting that I'm going late for.
Okay.
So I love this conversation, though. I love it.
Yeah.
Yes. And I think Mr. Davis can help you wrap it up.
Yeah.
Okay.
Bye, Miss Davis.
I can stick around, so.
So, I mean, also, like the one last thing I kind of wanted to talk about was what are, like, as a counselor to a student, what is some advice that you would give throughout like the pandemic? Because we are not sure how long it's gonna last, and as students, there's some difficulties that sometimes we need like adult advice from, but it's hard for students to reach out to their moms and dads or just other adult figures. So what are some advices that you give, like for us to manage our mental health throughout the pandemic?
I mean, I think what you all are doing right now is probably the best thing. I think the most important advice, and that's talking with others, and talking with others who you trust, and will have a compassionate and empathetic ear, whether it's a friend or whether it's a counselor. I think that's something to remember too, is that the counselors like at your school, even though obviously we're associated with the school and we work for SIS, like you're our number one focus, right? and you are able to have confidential conversations with your counselors. So I think there's a fear that somehow it's going to, the things that you talk about or the fears or anxieties, that it's going to get back to other people. That's something we want to assure you, that you're able to have those conversations. I think we've touched a lot on it, but being able to take intentional time to connect with others, I think being forgiving of yourself, not having high expectations or the same expectations maybe that you held for yourself. Like, I'm sure some of you, when you came into ninth grade, you were like, all right, I'm going to have a GPA of 98.5. I'm going to score a 1550 on my SATs by my 10th grade. So just like allowing all that stuff to be in the past, and I think just being okay with where you're at in this moment. I think also taking moments to try to get outside and unplug. I agree with you that social media can be a really positive outlet, but I think taking intentional breaks from it can also help. Just doing those basic things of self-care, like eating healthy, sleeping, drinking water. I mean, all those things you don't really think about, but especially when your body is under a lot of stress, you need to do a better job of taking care of yourself.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah. So thank you for this whole discussion. I feel like me and Amelia learned a lot about this, and it was a good way for us to kind of like look into what the lives of counselors are like and teachers. So I feel like we kind of learned to look out of the perspective, so not only the students' perspective, but then also the people around us and how they're feeling towards the situation. So thank you for your input today.
Yeah, thank you.
I just appreciate you all setting this up and making it a priority and being open and willing to having these types of conversations. And same thing, right? I've learned a lot from listening to your experiences and what it's been like for you all. And, I think just trusting that it's something we're all figuring out together and working on together.
Yeah.
So I think I'll close this whole video. And so thank you for Ms. Davis and Mr. Davis for participating in this whole podcast discussion. And I hope other people who are watching this video can also relate to this. And also, if they have any questions or like future topics they want us to discuss about from the SADD Club and YIC, I think they should comment below in the YouTube comment section. And also, I just wanted to say that mental health and the pandemic is something that it's a really sensitive topic. So I feel like everyone should be more understanding towards each other. And it's so important for us to just go through this whole pandemic without like having so much negativity towards it as well. So thank you for this collaboration, and I think this is it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.